Okay, I want to clarify how to use the ShapeBuilder tool. So I'm assuming everyone knows once you paste your image into Illustrator that you must lock that layer so that it doesn't move while you're working. So then the other thing you want to make sure you do is to make a new layer. That's the layer that you'll be working on. Make sure that you're working with a stroke and no fill so that you can see what's going on. I'm going to change my color so that you can see exactly what's going on. I'm also going to change my stroke size so that you can see it a little better. It's not necessary that you do that. Okay, when you're using the Shape Builder tool, you have to use a little critical and analytical thinking because you're trying to create one object out of several objects. Instead of using the pen tool to come in and draw all these little pieces, you can come in and draw one, copy and paste, and do rectangles. So when you first look at this particular shape, the most apparent shape are circles. So going to the ellipse tool, which is on the same tool as a rectangle tool. You want to make sure you hold your shift key in order to constrain your proportions in order to draw a circle. So I draw my circle. Always use the selection tool, which is the black arrow, to move things around. Do not use the direct selection tool. When you use a direct selection tool, you make mistakes of clicking on points and moving them and clicking on line segments and moving, and that would distort your shape. You can also nudge your shapes by using your arrow keys on your keyboard. Left, of course, is for left, and right is for right, and up and down. And if you notice, only pieces of my circle are moving. This is what happens when you select things using your direct selection tool. So let me undo this, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So don't forget, ellipse tool, hold your shift key, click and drag. Also, when you're clicking and dragging and you're trying to constrain proportions, you want to let go of the mouse first, then the button. Then I'll move this in place. Another thing I must make you aware of too, if there's nothing in the middle, you cannot click in the middle to move it. There's no fill there, so Illustrator knows that there are no vectors in that particular area. You have to click on the actual line. I hope I've clarified that for some people because I know some people ran into that. All right, the next step, instead of redrawing the circle again, you can just hold your Option key down to clone the circle, holding your shift key down, resize it, let go of the mouse, let go of the button, use the selection tool to move the circle in place. Okay, and I'm going to clone once again, resize, holding my shift key, using my selection tool to resize. Notice I'm resizing from the corners and of the bounding box. It just makes it a little bit easier. I'm cloning again. And the purpose of the ShapeBuilder tool is to build more complex objects using simple objects. So the next most apparent shape we have is a rectangle. So go to the rectangle tool. No need to really constrain the proportions. Just click, hold, and drag. You can make sure that your object touches the circles directly, or you can also just make sure they overlap. And I'll show you the difference of what happens. When you overlap here, I'm just going to go ahead and use the ShapeBuilder tool so you can see what happens. Get your selection tool and you're marqueing all of your objects because these are all the objects that are going to be in the complex object. You go to your ShapeBuilder tool. If you notice, areas highlight when you go over them. So I'm going to start here in the middle. I click, I hold, and I drag across because I want to connect all of these shapes together. And everything that's highlighted, that's what's going to be part of that shape. And there you go. If you notice, you get clean edges here. And even after you've kind of looked at it to see what happens, I'm going to take a step back. I just wanted to let you know what's going to be taking place. All right, so let me undo. Now notice that you have your rectangle. The easy way to get a rectangle, instead of doing a copying, paste, and rotating one at a time, we're going to clone and rotate at the same time. So with the rotation tool, you make sure your object is selected first, hit the rotation tool or the rotate tool. If you notice, the orientation of your rotation is in the center for that particular object. But we don't want it from that object because we're going to be cloning other objects from that particular object. And we want them all to come from the center. So I'm going to click here in the center. And notice I have my smart guides on. And you can see the word center. And it lets you know that that's where your cursor is. All right. Now that we've changed the orientation for our rotation, if you notice, look at your cursor. The cursor is a nice arrow. This lets you know that your rotate tool is active now. So I'll hold my option key down on my keyboard. Notice you see the double arrow that indicates that you're cloning. So now I'm going to click, hold, and drag once. I have the same object. Now you always have to go back and reset your orientation because Illustrator remembers this object, not this object. So I'm changing the orientation for that particular object. Hold down my option key, click, hold, drag. Changing the orientation, click, hold, drag. Reset the orientation, click, hold, drag. Reset. 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 And we're done. Now you marquee all your objects. ShapeBuilder Tool. Click, hold, drag. And we've done with that part so far. So if I turn off my image, this is what you're left with. Nice and pretty neat. Okay, now it's time to get the outside. We're going to use the same process as we did with the rectangles and connecting them to the circles. Only this time, we're just going to work with the pen tool and we're going to create this particular shape right here. You can hold your shift key to get your straight line across and connect it back. All right. Of course, you know what's next. We're getting ready to rotate and clone at the same time. Making sure the object is selected. Rotation tool. Notice my rotation is right here in the end because that's the last point that Illustrator reads. So make sure that you deselect your object before you begin your rotation. So that's what I'm getting ready to do. Your Shift Command A deselects everything. And your V key is for your selection tool. I select the whole object instead of just that point there because it would have rotated from that point and only that point. All right. The rotation by default is always at the center of the object. And so here's the center of the little shape that I drew. So I want to bring it to the center here. You can eye it on this particular piece. Okay. Option key, click, hold, drag. Reset, hold down the option key, click, hold, drag. Reset, hold down the Option key, click, hold, drag. And I'm going to continue to say this so that it can kind of get embedded in your mind. You're resetting the orientation of the new object that has been rotated. Reset. Reset. Now there's also a command that's called the transform again. And I find it easier to do it manually so that the little spokes are not offset. But if you do a Command D, it'll do a transform again, and it continue to go around. And I actually had that pretty perfect. So you can try that one as well. I'll just, for safety's sake, I marquee everything again, excuse me. And I come in here and I connect my shapes. If I notice that this one is not connecting all the way down here, and that's probably because those are the ones that I used the Command D on. So let's go back and see what happened with that. We'll probably have to come in and make sure that these points are further inside of the object. Let's check to see. Yep. And if you have these little points here, then you can always go and either try to get it out with the ShapeBuilder tool, or simply use the direct selection, click on that particular area and press delete. So by the time you're finished, you should be able to finish it. And notice now it doesn't connect here. That's when I use the transform again. So maybe that's one particular step that you don't want to use. But remember that that's one way that you can do a transformation instead of going in and doing it manually. Just for this particular piece, it's best to just do it manually. Let's go ahead and actually I'm going to take it all the way back so that I can go back to my beginning before I started the transform again. Right there. Just to recap, for those of you who didn't get it, I'm resetting the orientation to the center, and I'm rotating, and I am cloning at the same time. Let's see if this makes a difference. And anytime that the ShapeBuilder tool doesn't work with two particular objects, it's probably because it's not intersecting. The objects are not intersecting each other enough so that Illustrator sees both. Now let's see what happens. No issues. Okay, now there you have it, your first cog. And so if I turn off my image, zoom out, this is what we have. And we will eventually resize them. And if you notice, if I select the object, it's one whole object by itself. Now the reason I have these little pieces here, I believe, is because that's when I use that transform again. So I'll just delete that out. And you can move yours around to make sure that you don't have those extras either. If you resize, I would hold down my Shift key. I'll make it bigger. And there you have it. And then you go ahead and finish the remainder of the cogs on the page.